Judge Caprio, I want to give you some context. My father's name is on 3 buildings in this city. He has donated to judicial campaigns for 20 years. This woman started with $47. I spend that on breakfast. There is no version of today where she wins and I walk out of here with a problem. The smart move is to let this go. Those were the exact words, right here in my courtroom, in front of 32 people, in front of the woman he had been slowly trying to crush for months. He looked me straight in the eyes when he said it. He did not flinch. He did not lower his voice. He said it clearly and calmly, like a man delivering the closing line of a deal he had already closed in his mind before he walked through the door. My name is Judge Frank Caprio. This is Providence Municipal Court. I have been sitting at this bench for a very long time, long enough to have heard almost everything, long enough to know the difference between a person who made a mistake and a person who believes the rules simply do not apply to them. And what I was looking at that Thursday morning was something I will not forget, not because it was the loudest moment this courtroom has ever seen, but because it was one of the most honest. That young man said exactly what he believed, and what he believed was that money and a last name could walk into a room and erase what someone built with their bare hands. He was about to find out how wrong he was. But before I tell you what I said to him, I need you to understand who was standing at the other podium, because this story is not really about Prescott Aldridge III. This story is about Marisela Tatum, and what Marisela Tatum did with $47 is something that should be talked about in every classroom, every kitchen, and every quiet moment when someone is trying to decide whether their dream is worth chasing. Every day in this country, someone is sitting at a table with a small idea and an empty bank account, wondering if it is even worth trying, wondering if people like them get to build things that last. And every day, someone with far more money and far less imagination is watching, calculating, deciding whether to buy that dream or bury it. That is what this case was about. If you believe that the law should protect the person who works for something just as strongly as it protects the person born into everything, then stay right here with me. What happens in this courtroom today is going to matter to you. Before we go any further, if this story is already gripping you, hit that like button right now, because I promise you, what I am about to tell you will hit even harder. Stay with me. This is the part where real justice starts. Officer Hensley called the case at 9:47 in the morning on a Thursday in July. Case number 2026 MC 04471, City of Providence versus Marisela Tatum. Charge criminal trespass, Class C misdemeanor. I looked at the case file in front of me. Criminal trespass. A Class C misdemeanor means it is not the most serious kind of crime, but it is still a crime. It still goes on your record. It still follows you. The details said it happened at a food festival. At a vendor booth, I kept reading. The woman had a permit. She had written permission. She had paid her fees. And someone had still called the police on her. I read it again to make sure I had it right. Yes, she had done everything correctly. And still, she was here. I asked Marisela Tatum to step forward. She was 34 years old. She was wearing a blue blazer, the kind that you press carefully the night before because you want to look professional, even when everything feels uncertain. The elbows were slightly faded, the way clothes get when they have been worn and washed and worn again for a long time. Her hair was pulled back tight and neat. She had circles under her eyes, the deep kind that do not go away with one good night of sleep, the kind that come from years of early mornings and late nights. She was carrying a folder. It was thick and full, and she held it against her chest with both hands, like it was something precious. It was. I asked her to tell me a little about herself. She looked at me for a moment, not suspiciously, more like she was surprised that someone was actually asking. Then she straightened her back just a little, and she began. 2 years ago, she told me she was working 2 jobs at the same time. Days at a laundry facility, folding other people's shirts and sorting other people's sheets while her feet ached from standing on hard floors for 8 hours. Nights at a gas station, ringing up snacks and drinks while the city moved around her in the dark. She had a 7-year-old daughter at home named Cora. She had a neighbor who watched Cora in the evenings while Marisela worked. She was 2 months behind on rent. She had $47 in her checking account. Not 4,700, not 47,000. $47.63 to be exact. She told me she remembered the exact number. She said she had looked at it so many times that night that she had memorized it. That was the night she called her grandmother. Her grandmother's name was Beatrice. Everyone called her Nana Bea. She was 81 years old and she lived about 40 minutes away in a house she had owned for decades. Nana B had a hot sauce recipe that had been passed down through the family for 3 generations. It started with Marisela's great-grandmother, who had made it for Sunday dinners and church potlucks and every celebration that ever happened in their family. Thick, golden, smoky, a blend of dried peppers, roasted garlic, and a touch of apple cider vinegar. Not fiery, not sharp, just deep and warm and rich, the kind of taste that makes you feel like someone loves you. Nana B had said for years, "Baby, this recipe is pure gold. One day you are going to know exactly what to do with it." That night on the phone, crying a little and trying not to, Marisela told her grandmother she had $47 and she did not know what to do. And Nana Bea said, "Then you already know. Go get your ingredients." Marisela spent all $47. She bought peppers, garlic, vinegar, and glass bottles at the grocery store. She made 12 bottles on her kitchen stove that same night. She designed a label by hand on a piece of paper, photographed it with her phone, and printed the sticker sheets at the public library the next morning for $2 she borrowed from her neighbor. She called the brand Mari's Gold. She brought all 12 bottles to her church's Sunday potluck that weekend. Every single one sold before the meal was over. People were pressing napkins and writing down her number. An older man who owned a barbecue trailer said, "Young lady, I would like to buy this by the case." She drove home that night with empty crates and a list of names. She made 20 bottles the next week, then 50. Then she applied for a business license. Then she filed for a registered trademark on the name Mari's Gold. Then she saved enough to rent kitchen prep space for 2 hours on Saturday mornings from a local restaurant that let it out while they were closed. She set up a simple online store. She started appearing at neighborhood markets. She kept going. By last fall, Marisela Tatum had a booth at 4 regular markets around Providence, an online store with customers in 8 states, an annual revenue of just under $40,000. Not life-changing money, not yet, but it was real. It was hers, built from the ground up with her own hours and her own hands and the memory of her grandmother's voice on the phone at midnight. That was when Prescott Aldridge III noticed her. He walked in while she was still telling me all of this. I want you to picture the moment. Marisela is at the podium, speaking quietly and steadily, holding herself together with effort. She is in a faded blazer. She drove here in a 2014 Honda Civic with a crack running along the front bumper. She parked in a metered space because she had to count out quarters. She has been up since 4 in the morning, and then the back doors of my courtroom swing open. Prescott Aldridge III was 26 years old. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit with no tie, top 2 buttons open, like formality was something beneath him. His shoes were dark Italian leather, the kind that do not make a sound when they touch the floor because they are made for people who never have to rush. His hair was styled perfectly. A gold watch sat on his wrist and caught the light when he moved. Behind him walked his attorney, Brandon Schiff, in a pressed navy suit with a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payment. Prescott did not apologize for being late. He did not say, "Excuse me." He walked to the respondent's table, pulled out his chair, sat down, and slowly, casually uncuffed one of his sleeves and recuffed it, like he was killing time, like this was an appointment he had reluctantly agreed to attend. I said good morning to him. He looked up. He glanced briefly at Marisela, then he looked back at me and said, "Let's just get this moving. I have a lunch engagement at noon." Somewhere in the gallery, a woman made a sound. Not a gasp exactly, more like a quiet pull of breath through the nose. The kind of involuntary reaction people have when they see something they cannot believe they are witnessing. I looked at Prescott steadily. I said, "Mr. Aldridge, this court operates on its own schedule, and while you are in this room, you will speak with respect to this bench, to this process and to every person present. Do you understand that? He gave me a small nod. It was the kind of nod that means yes, while the eyes say, I already know how this ends. I made a mental note of it. Now I want to pause for just a moment. If you are feeling the weight of this story right now, if you are shaking your head at this young man, or your heart is going out to Marisela, share this video with someone who needs to see it, someone who believes the playing field should be level for everyone, no matter how much is in their bank account. Send it to them right now and keep watching, because this is where things start to get serious. I turned back to the case file. The charge against Marisela, criminal trespass, arose from an incident at the Providence Summer Food Festival. The festival took place at Riverside Park on the 12th of July. The trespass complaint had been filed by a man named Thomas Wren, who identified himself in the report as a representative of Aldridge Holdings, the company founded by Senator Duncan Aldridge, Prescott's father. I asked Prescott's attorney, Mr. Schiff, to explain the connection. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and delivered his explanation quickly and smoothly, the way lawyers do when they have rehearsed something many times. He said that Aldridge Holdings had recently submitted a trademark application for the name Mari's Gold as part of a new artisan food line they were developing. He said that because of this pending application, Marisela Tatum's continued use of that name at a public commercial event potentially constituted infringement and unauthorized commercial activity. He said the trespass report had been filed by their representative in order to protect the company's interests. He said all of this very smoothly, but there was a word in there I wanted to examine: pending. I looked at my clerk, Donna Reeves. I asked her to note that word for the record. Then I turned to Marisela. She opened her folder. She did not say anything. She simply pulled out 3 documents and laid them on the podium in front of her, one at a time, slow and deliberate. The first was her original business license for Mari's Gold, issued by the City of Providence, dated 22 months ago. The second was her federal trademark registration certificate from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, dated 11 months ago, approved. Official, her name on it. The third was her vendor permit for the Providence Summer Food Festival, signed by the event director, valid for the 12th of July. She set them down like 3 playing cards and folded her hands over the folder again. I looked at all 3 documents. I looked at the dates. Then I looked at Mr. Schiff. I said, Counsel, your client filed a trademark application for a name that was already federally registered and approved 11 months before their application was submitted. Mr. Schiff said there may have been some procedural overlap and that the trademark review process was still ongoing. I said, there is no overlap here. These dates are 11 months apart. This trademark was already active when your client filed. Mr. Schiff started to speak again. Prescott leaned over and said something quickly and quietly to him. Mr. Schiff nodded. Then Prescott looked up at me and said, Your Honor, I think we are getting off track. The case here is trespass, not a trademark dispute. That is a separate matter. I said, I decide what track we are on, Mr. Aldridge. And right now, I am trying to understand why a woman with a valid permit and a registered trademark is standing in my courtroom facing a criminal charge. Prescott exhaled through his nose, loud enough for me to hear it. I looked at him. I said, Is there something you would like to say, Mr. Aldridge? He said, I just think this is being made more complicated than it needs to be. She is a small vendor. We are a holding company. We offered to buy her brand. She said no, that is her right. But at some point, she needs to understand that we have resources she does not have, and the smart move for her was to take the offer and move on. I said, What was the offer, Mr. Aldridge? He paused, a short pause. He said, We offered a fair amount. I said, How much? He said, That is in the documentation. I said, Tell me the number. Another pause. He said, $200. Not one person in that gallery moved, but the room felt different after he said it. I asked Marisela if she had the documentation of that offer. She did. She took a printed email chain from her folder and handed it to Officer Hensley, who brought it to my bench. I read through it carefully. The first email was from a subsidiary of Aldrich Holdings addressed to Marisela's business email. The offer was written out precisely: $200 for the full rights to the Mary's Gold recipe and brand name, including all associated trademarks and business materials. $200 for a brand doing $40,000 a year in revenue, for a registered trademark, for a family recipe 3 generations old, for 2 years of sacrifice. Marisela had replied within 2 days. Her response was polite. She wrote, "Thank you for reaching out. Mary's Gold is not for sale. This brand is my family, my work, and the future I am building for my daughter. I hope you understand, and I wish your company well." 3 days after that, one line came back from the Aldrich Holdings address. "You'll regret this." I set the email down on my bench. I looked at Prescott Aldridge III. I said, "Did you authorize this communication?" He said, "I did not write it personally." I said, "Did your company send it?" He said, "My company has a large staff. I cannot be held responsible for every—" I said, "Mr. Aldridge, yes or no? Did your company send this email?" The room was very quiet. Then he said, "Yes." Mr. Schiff stood up quickly. He said the final line of that email could be interpreted in many different ways, and that it should not be read as a threat. He said this case was about a trespass at a food festival, and that we were going far outside the scope of the charge. I said calmly and clearly that I would decide the scope. I also said that if his client made one more attempt to redirect this proceeding away from the evidence I was reviewing, I would take additional note of it. Prescott leaned back. He crossed his arms. He studied Marisela for a moment, the way you might look at something that is inconveniencing you. Then he said, just loudly enough for the room to hear it, "This is a waste of everyone's time." There was that line again. I looked directly at him. I said, "Mr. Aldridge, I'm going to stop you right there. Contempt of court means showing disrespect for the authority of this bench. It carries a penalty. I have now heard that phrase from you twice. I want to be very direct. The third time you say it, or anything like it, we will deal with it immediately. Am I understood?" He looked at me. Something shifted slightly in his expression. Not quite humility, but perhaps the first small recognition that this was not going the way he had expected. He said, "Yes, Your Honor." His jaw was tight. He had been told no, probably for the first time in a very long time. I have seen this many times over the years. A person who grows up with wealth and access and a name that opens doors, they move through the world in a way that most people never experience. Doors open, people agree, problems dissolve. They do not learn the lessons that hard times teach you, not because they are evil people necessarily, but because they have never once had to face a wall they could not simply walk around. I was about to become that wall. I asked Officer Hensley to bring forward the second exhibit. This was a document that had been submitted to the court before the hearing, as part of a referral from the Providence Small Business Interference Task Force. It was a printed log of text messages retrieved from a phone number registered to Prescott Aldridge III. The messages had been obtained legally, through proper legal channels, as part of a separate ongoing investigation that had been quietly building for 3 weeks. I read the messages aloud, slowly, one at a time. I wanted every single person in that gallery to hear them. First message, sent from Prescott's number to a contact labeled T. Wren, Thomas Wren, the same man who had filed the trespass report. Sent 3 weeks before the food festival. Find out every market and event Tatum has coming up. Flag her wherever possible. I want her out of the market before fall. Second message, sent the day before the food festival. She still has a confirmed booth at Riverside? I thought we were handling this. Call Thomas. Have him file a complaint during the event. Make it clean and make it fast. Third message, sent the morning of the festival at 9:41. Confirmation that it went through. I want to know the minute she gets pulled. I set the printout down. Thomas Wren, the man who had called the police on Marisela Tatum at the food festival, had not acted independently. He had not acted out of confusion or mistake. He had been instructed. He had been organized. He had been used as a tool to file a false police report against a woman who had done nothing wrong. The courtroom was so quiet that I could hear the air conditioning unit on the east wall. Then Prescott looked up at me. His attorney was whispering something in his ear. Prescott shook his head, just once, firmly. He straightened up in his chair, and he looked at Marisela. I watched his face as he looked at her. He looked at her the way someone might look at a door they had expected to be unlocked that turned out to be bolted shut. And then something in him seemed to decide that he was not going to adjust. He was going to push harder instead. He turned to me, and he said, in a composed and almost reasonable voice, "Your Honor, with all due respect to this process and to you personally, this woman runs a hobby. She has a home kitchen and a label she made on a computer. What she built is a weekend project that grew slightly beyond her expectations. My company has legal teams, distribution networks, national retail relationships, and the resources to take a small local product and make it something real. We were attempting to absorb it into a legitimate platform where it could actually reach people. She should be grateful that we saw potential in what she made. She should be grateful." I let those 3 words sit in the room. The woman who spent her last $47, who stood at a stove at midnight with her daughter sleeping in the next room and made 12 bottles by hand, who folded strangers' laundry and rang up midnight snacks, and kept going, who built a federally registered trademark and a growing business with nothing but dedication, love, and a grandmother's recipe. She should be grateful. I did not raise my voice. I said, "Mr. Aldridge, I would like to bring in one more piece of evidence before I respond to that statement. Officer Hensley, please bring in the witness." Celeste Morrow walked in from the side door. She was 51 years old, the coordinator of the Providence Summer Food Festival, calm and professional and carrying a folder of her own. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth. She testified clearly and briefly. She said Marisela Tatum had applied for a vendor spot at the festival 4 months in advance. She said Marisela had been accepted, had paid her vendor fee in full, and had been confirmed in writing. She said she had personally greeted Marisela at her booth at 7:30 in the morning on the day of the festival. She said when the trespass report was called in that afternoon, she had been confused and upset because Marisela had every legal right to be there. She also handed the court a copy of the festival's security footage. Officer Hensley cued it on the courtroom monitor, a 62-second clip from the front gate camera, showing Marisela Tatum arriving that morning with her crates, scanning her vendor badge at the reader, and walking in with a smile on her face and a folder under her arm. She waved at someone off camera. She was not sneaking. She was not hiding. She was working. I stopped the footage. I looked at Prescott Aldridge III for a long, steady moment, and then I said, "Mr. Aldridge, your company sent her a threatening email. Your text messages show you organized a false police report against her. You attempted to acquire her federally registered trademark for $200, and when she said no to all of it, you had her brought into a criminal court on a charge she did not commit. Is there anything you would like to say before I respond?" He looked at me, and that is when he said it. That is when he said the words that changed everything about that morning. He leaned slightly forward in his seat. He kept his voice steady and low, like a man making a business proposition. And he said, "Judge Caprio, I want to be clear with you. My father's name is on 3 buildings in this city. He has donated to judicial campaigns in this state for over 20 years. I am not threatening you. I am giving you context. This woman started with $47. I spend that on breakfast. There is no version of today where she walks out ahead and I walk out with a problem. You know that. The smart move, for everyone in this room, is to let this go." 10 full seconds of silence. I did not move. Not one person in that gallery moved. Donna Reeves, my clerk, who had been writing in her ledger without pause for 2 hours, stopped writing. She looked up slowly. A woman in the second row of the gallery put her hand over her mouth. A man near the back made a sound like he had been hit with something. Prescott sat with his chin very slightly raised, the way he had been sitting all morning, like he had said something reasonable, like he was waiting for the room to agree with him the way rooms usually did. He had just tried to tell me that justice was a transaction, that his father's money was a wall around him, that this woman's dream, her $47 dream that she had bled for, was just a small inconvenience he could make disappear because of how much he spent on eggs and toast. I want you to know something. In all my years on this bench, I have heard people beg. I have heard people bargain. I have heard people threaten. I have heard people cry. But what I heard in those words was something different. It was the voice of someone who had never once faced a consequence they could not write a check to escape. He was about to understand what that feels like. Wait, right before I tell you exactly what I said next, let me ask you something. If you have been watching this and you feel what I felt in that moment, that fire, that absolute certainty that no one should ever get away with what this young man just tried, then subscribe to this channel. Thousands of people watch these cases because they believe in something simple, that the law belongs to everyone, not just to people with buildings named after their fathers. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me. Because what I say next is the part people do not forget. I looked at Prescott Aldridge III for a long, long moment, long enough that he shifted slightly in his chair. Then I said, "Mr. Aldridge, I need you to stop, and I need you to listen to me, not to your attorney, not to the voice in your head telling you how this ends. You, listen to me." He was still. "Prescott, you just sat in my courtroom and told me that your father's name is on buildings. You told me he donates to judicial campaigns. And then, in front of 32 witnesses, you told me that this woman cannot win because she started with $47 and you spend that amount on your morning meal. You said that, out loud, in here." I paused. "I want you to think about those words, Prescott, not as a legal argument, as a human being. Think about what you just said." His jaw was tight. He said nothing. "You are 26 years old. You have never once had to stand in a library and count out quarters to print business labels because you could not afford a printer. You have never had to fold strangers' laundry at 6 in the morning because your child needed new shoes for school and you were behind on rent. You have never built something, truly built something, from the absolute bottom, from nothing but your hands and your will and a recipe your grandmother trusted you with. You have never done that." I turned briefly to look at Marisela. She was very still. She had not looked away from me. Her eyes were bright. She was holding every piece of herself together with great effort and great dignity. This woman has a daughter named Cora. Cora is 7 years old. Cora has watched her mother get up before the sun for 2 years and come home after dark. She has watched her mother stack bottles on the kitchen counter and handwrite labels and carry crates to markets and smile at strangers and do it all again the next weekend. Do you know what that little girl is learning, Prescott? She is learning that integrity is real, that effort is real, that something you build with your hands and your heart belongs to you, that the world cannot just walk in and take it because it has more money. I let that sit. Prescott, you looked at what this woman built and you called it a hobby. You called it a weekend project. You said she should be grateful. Grateful for what? For the threatening email your company sent her, for the false police report your instructions produced, for being dragged into a criminal court on a charge she never deserved. Tell me, Prescott, what exactly should she feel grateful for? He was looking at the table now. And then, and I am not going to move past this because it is serious, you sat in my courtroom, in my presence, and you mentioned your father's political donations as a factor in how I should rule. You used the phrase, "the smart move," to my face, in front of witnesses. I leaned forward. Prescott, let me give you something in return. Let me give you my context. Your father's name is not in my case file. His donations have never sat on this bench and they never will. The only thing that has ever sat on this bench is the law, and the law does not care about the buildings downtown. The law does not adjust for what you spend on breakfast. The law says that a woman with a registered trademark, a signed vendor permit, and a documented record of being threatened and falsely reported has rights that this court is sworn to defend. She is not small, Prescott. She is not a hobby. She is not a weekend project. She is a business owner and a mother and a daughter who trusted her grandmother's voice at midnight and built something real. And today, every single thing she built is going to be protected in this room. I heard someone in the gallery quietly start to cry. Now, Prescott, I want you to do one thing. Look at Marisela Tatum, not at your shoes, not at your attorney. Look at her. He raised his eyes slowly. Marisela looked right back at him. She did not look away. She did not blink. She stood straight, and she held his gaze with the steadiness of someone who had been through enough that nothing could knock her over. After a moment I said, "Good, remember that face, because everything I am about to say comes from that face." Now, if you are ready for the part that the whole courtroom stood up for, keep watching. But first, let me tell you something important. People who stand for justice need to find each other. Drop a like on this video right now if you believe that a $47 dream deserves the same legal protection as a $47 million corporation. Let's see how many of us there are. Now, Mr. Aldridge, please rise. He stood, slowly. Something had changed in his posture. The easy confidence was gone. His shoulders were still square, but the chin was lower. He looked like a building that had just been given notice. I said, "I am going to address several matters in this proceeding, and I am going to address them in order. You will remain standing. First, all charges against Marisela Tatum, criminal trespass, Class C misdemeanor, Case 2026 MC04471, are hereby dismissed. Dismissed in full. Dismissed with prejudice. That means they cannot be refiled against her. That means they do not appear on her record. Bailiff, please note that clearly for the record." I heard Marisela exhale. It was a very quiet sound, but in that silence I heard it. Second, Mr. Aldridge, I am finding you in civil contempt of this court. Contempt means you showed deliberate disrespect for the authority of this proceeding, specifically by attempting to influence this court's ruling through mention of your father's political contributions. That is a serious act, and it carries a serious response. You are fined $2,000, payable to the Providence Municipal Court Administrative Fund. That fine is due before you leave this building today. Mr. Schiff opened his mouth. I held up one hand. I am not finished. The room waited. Third, Aldridge Holdings is being formally referred to the Providence Business Standards Board for investigation of a fraudulent trademark application, specifically the filing of a trademark application for a name that was already federally registered by another party, submitted with apparent intent to interfere with that party's legal and commercial rights. I am requesting a complete audit of that application, all related filings, and all communications between Aldridge Holdings and the United States Patent and Trademark Office regarding this name. If fraudulent intent is confirmed, and based on what I have seen in this room today, I strongly believe it will be, your company will face civil liability that extends well beyond what I can impose from this bench. But I can make sure the right authorities are looking very carefully, and I am. I noticed that Mr. Schiff had stopped writing entirely. Fourth, the false trespass complaint filed by Thomas Wren at the direction of Prescott Aldridge III is being formally referred to the Providence Police Department for investigation of filing a false report. Mr. Wren's instructions, as documented in the text messages entered into this record, came directly from you. The investigation into his liability and yours will move forward immediately after this hearing. I paused. I took a breath. I wanted what came next to land with the weight it deserved. Fifth, you will pay direct financial restitution to Marisela Tatum in the amount of $15,000. This amount accounts for the attorney fees she was forced to incur, responding to your company's legal pressure, the vendor revenue she lost on the day of the festival when her event was disrupted by your false report, and the costs of additional trademark defense she has been forced to undertake as a direct result of your company's interference with her registered mark. $15,000. You have 30 days from today to make that payment. Failure to do so will result in an immediate return to this court. Prescott blinked. His mouth opened slightly and then closed. He looked at his attorney. His attorney's expression was unreadable but very, very still. Sixth, you will complete 200 hours of community service. Those hours will not be served picking up litter in a park. They will be served in places that are directly connected to what you tried to destroy. I laid this out carefully. 150 of those hours will be served at the Providence Small Business Development Center. That is a center where people, many of whom started with far less than $47, come to learn how to build businesses legally, officially and sustainably. You will assist them, you will help with filing, organizing documents, answering phones, whatever the center's director assigns you. You will not lead, you will not advise, you will assist. You will wear whatever you normally wear, and you will show up on time every scheduled session without exception. The center's director, Ms. Vivian Park, will submit a monthly conduct report to this court. If those reports are anything less than cooperative, you will be back in front of me, I continued. The remaining 50 hours will be served at the Providence Public Library in the Small Business Resource Room. That is the room where people like Marisela Tatum come to print labels on library computers because they cannot afford a printer at home, where they research trademarks and licenses and permits and all the steps it takes to build something real from nothing. You will be in that room. You will assist those people. You will learn what it actually looks like to start from the beginning. Something moved across Prescott's face. I believe it was the first genuine embarrassment he had felt in years. 7th, you will write a handwritten letter of apology to Marisela Tatum, not typed, not dictated to an assistant, not reviewed and polished by your attorney, handwritten by you in your own words. That letter must be a minimum of 1 full page. It must be specific. It must name what you did, not in general terms, specifically. It must address the personal harm you caused, not just the legal violations. It must be submitted to this court for review before it is delivered to Ms. Tatum. If the court finds it inadequate, you will write it again. 8th, you will participate in a recorded 15-minute video statement for the Providence Small Business Protection Council's annual Entrepreneur Awareness Program. In that statement, you will describe the actions you took, the harm those actions caused, and what you learned from this proceeding. Your name will not be removed. Your face will not be hidden. That statement will be used in workshops for new and aspiring business owners across this state. You will not have approval over the final edit. I looked at him directly. And finally, you are placed on a 12-month supervised probationary period beginning today. Any new complaint of business interference, intimidation, harassment, or fraudulent filing against you or any company you are associated with will bring you immediately back before this court. When that happens, I will not be starting from zero. I will be picking up exactly where we left off today. Officer Hensley shifted his weight slightly. He did not take a step. He did not say a word. But every person in that room felt the movement. Prescott felt it. He glanced at Officer Hensley, then back at me. He understood. He sat down slowly, not with attitude, not with indifference. He sat down the way someone sits when the full weight of what has just happened is beginning to press on their shoulders. If you are still watching, if this story moved something in you today, then this is that moment I ask you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. A friend who is building something small and questioning whether it is worth it. A young person who thinks the game is rigged. A parent who tells their kids that hard work matters. Show them this. Tell them that this courtroom exists. Tell them that the law showed up today. Subscribe so you never miss a case like this one, because there will be more. There always are. Time moved forward after that morning. Marisela Tatum walked out of Providence Municipal Court at 11:23. She had that thick folder still under her arm. On the steps outside, a woman she had never met stopped her and asked if she needed help carrying her things. Marisela laughed. It was a short, surprised laugh, the kind that comes out when a kindness catches you off guard. She said no thank you. She walked to her 2014 Honda Civic, got in, and sat there. Officer Hensley told me later that she sat in that car for nearly 20 minutes before she pulled out of the space. I think she was just letting it settle. I think she was telling herself over and over that it was real, that it had actually happened, that justice had come, and it had been real, and it had been hers. The following Saturday morning, she was back in her rented kitchen space by 4 o'clock. Crates on the counter, clean bottles lined up on the prep table, the same peppers, the same garlic, the same recipe her Nana B had given her, the same hands, the same rhythm, the same love in every single jar. But things had changed outside that kitchen. The story spread. It spread on social media and in neighborhood conversations and on food blogs and in the kind of word of mouth that moves faster than any advertisement. People started ordering. A regional grocery chain reached out within 2 weeks. A food publication called the following month. A catering company in Boston put in a standing order. By the following spring, Mari's Gold was on the shelves of 43 stores in 3 states, with a 4th state in negotiations. She had started with $47. She was not done. As for Prescott Aldridge III, he arrived for his first community service session at the Providence Small Business Development Center 6 weeks after sentencing. I was told he came in a car that was noticeably less expensive than the one that had been parked outside my courthouse. He was quiet that first day. He helped people organize filing paperwork. He did not complain. He came back the following week without being reminded. By his 4th session, he had begun asking questions. Not the kind of questions that a Yale graduate asks to sound smart, the genuine kind. He sat beside a woman named Dorothy, who was building a catering business out of her apartment, and he asked her how she had managed her first year without any outside financing. He listened to her answer for a long time without looking at his phone. His handwritten letter of apology to Marisela was submitted to my clerk for review on the 28th day of the 30-day window. It was 2 pages, front and back, in careful handwriting. My clerk told me it was specific, that it named things, that it sounded like a person rather than a press release. I cannot tell you whether Prescott Aldridge III became a different man. That is not something this bench can measure or guarantee. Growth is slow. It happens in the private moments that no one witnesses, not in courtrooms. But I can tell you this, for those months, he sat beside people who had started from nothing, and he helped them instead of hurting them. That is where it begins. That is always where it begins. After the courtroom emptied that morning, I stayed at my bench for a few extra minutes. I do this sometimes. The room is different when it is empty, quieter in a way that invites thinking. I straightened my papers. I thought about $47. $47.63. That number had been called breakfast money. It had been used as a punchline, a dismissal, proof that something was too small to matter. But I sat there thinking about what $47 had actually done. It had bought the first 12 bottles. It had started something that grew into a trademark, and a business and a livelihood, and a story that 32 people had witnessed become justice. Here is what I know after all these years. Every great thing that was ever built in this world started as something small, a seed, a spark, an idea that sounded modest at the beginning. The size of the beginning has never once determined the size of the ending. Never. Not for anyone. And the purpose of this courtroom, my purpose, the reason I took this oath, the reason I still sit here, is to make sure that courage is protected, that a person who starts with $47 stands in the same legal protection as a person who starts with 47 million, that no building downtown, no donated check, no tailored suit, no last name, no casual mention of what someone spends on breakfast can walk into this room and simply take what someone else built. That is not a complicated idea. It does not require a law degree to understand. It is simple and it is human, and it is what the word justice actually means when you strip everything else away. I stood up from my bench, gathered my papers, and walked toward my chambers. The work was done, for today.